Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf nun aleph in zbachim as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. We're continuing with our discussion. If you're looking at the chart that I handed out or you got by email, we're at the left column now. Davar lamed b'binyanav. What do you say there? If something is originally learned out from a simple comparison, A is like B or B is like A. So if you learn B is like A based on a simple comparison, not a kal v'chomer, not a gzeira shava, not a hekesh, but rather a simple comparison, can you then learn out C from B also with a simple comparison? So the Gemara is going to try to prove that. We're at the sixth line on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Davar bin binyanav, something that's learned out of a binyanav. In other words, if B is similar to A, and that's why we say the halacha is by B like it is by A, mal shilma behekesh. Can you then learn out C from B via hekesh or uva gzeira shava? He's listing them all now. Uva kal v'chomer, uva binyanav. What do you say there? Now, the reason he lists them all is because he's only going to answer one of them. So Tavalim bin Yanav, Mao, Shilma behekesh, uva gzeira shava, uva kal v'chomer bin Yanav. Again, if you learn out B from A via a comparison, a bin Yanav, can learn out C from B with a hekesh, with a gzeira shava, the kal v'chomer bin Yanav? The Gemara says, Pshot miya machada. We're only going to paskin one of them, the last one. And that's why if you look at the chart, you'll see that the first three are lo nifshat. They weren't decided. That would be hekesh, gzeira shava, and kal v'chomer not decided. There's a footnote number 5 that Moshe asked me about yesterday, Moshe Smith, that he does refer to a Gemara in Shavuos. Rashi in Shavuos does say that the first one does work, Maushil and Behekesh, but that's another discussion. We're concerned with the last one here, the very bottom left corner, where it says Maushil bin Davlin bin Yanav, Maushil bin Yanav, can you learn bin Yanav? The answer is Ken. And why? Lina Badam, as we're going to see now from the following discussion. What do we mean here? Shot mi b'chada, says the Gemara. We're going to decide one of them. Okay, what is that? If you look at the Gemara, if you turn to Pei Dalid in our Gemara, Pei Dalid, if you look up there, there's a Mishnah there that says the following things that are basically disqualified, something happened to them, however, in a carbon, the Mishnah says, Elu im lo yerdu. Even though they are puzzle, they become puzzle in some manner, disqualified, but if they put them on the Mizbeach, you leave them up there. If you put it on the Mizbeach, you put them up there. What, for example, Halon. Let's say the dam stayed overnight. And so that once you stayed overnight, you can't use it to sprinkle anymore. But let's say, anyway, they sprinkle on the Mizbeach, you leave it up there. Or the emurim, the fatty parts, you're supposed to do them that day or that night. And if you lift them over the next day, they're really puzzled. But if you put them up there, you leave them up there. Also, Yosef, it left the Azara, Tame, gives all kinds of Isurim that if you did them, you leave them up there. Rabbi Yehuda says there are 3 things that if they're puzzle, you take them down. You don't leave them up on the Mizbeach. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Shenishchet balayla, let's say you shechted at night. Shechit has to be done like Kabbalah Lachan Zrika during the day. That's so puzzle that if you put them on the Mizbeach, you leave it, you take it down. Or Nishbach Dama, or the dam spilt out. Dam spilt out. If it's Nishbach Dama, Rashi says, Rashi doesn't tell us over there, if the dam spilt out, then you don't, any part you put on the Mizbeach afterwards, you take that down. Or Yatzadam Chosaklam, or if the dam went outside of the Azara, that's outside of the column, outside of the curtains, outside of the Azara, then also, you take it down. Why? The Gemara explains that Rabbi Yehuda holds there's three miyutim, there's 3 exclusions. Beginning at Sav, it says, Zos Torah Ha'olah. Torah is an inclusive thing, includes everything. But then it says, He Ha'olah. So he darshans, Zos is an exclusion, He is an exclusion, and the second Ha'olah is also an exclusion. Hari Gimel Miyutin, says the Gemara, right after the Mishnah there on Pei Daled Amud Aleph. In those 3 cases, if the shechita was done at night, or the dam spilt out, once the dam is all spilt out, you can't zorik it anymore. So if you put anything on this Mizbeach, you take it down. Or the dam went outside the Beis Hamikdash, also there, outside the Azara of the Beis Hamikdash, also that you bring them down, because he has 3 exclusions. Reb Shimon disagrees. Reb Shimon says you include everything because it says Zos Torah Sola. That includes everything. Basically, Reb Yehuda also agrees with Torah Sola, but he has these exclusions of Zos Hi Ola. Okay, why am I bringing down this whole Mishnah over here? This whole discussion? Because the Gemara now, back in our Gemara in Daf Aleph, it refers to that. What are we referring to? We're trying to say if you learn out B from A via Binyanav, a comparison, can you learn out C from B also via a comparison? So back in our Gemara in Nun Aleph, Nema Amru Lon Bedam Kosher. Now, the Gemara says that if it was Lon Bedam, even where did Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi says if it was shechted at night or the dam is spilt out or it went outside, then im also tered. You take down the carbon even if you put it up already. But those three psulim are so bad they're excluded from zos, he, and ha'ola. But the other ones, let's say the dam stayed overnight, that's not so bad, so it's included. So the Gemara now says, Rabbi Yehuda explains like this. Rabbi Yehuda explains this on Amid Beis. Neima omru lam bedam kosher. Why do you say that if it stayed overnight, it's kosher? Shrei lan beimur and kosher. Oh, because if the emurim stayed overnight, that's also kosher. Now, what does it mean it's kosher? It's also supposed to be done the same day, right? Why? She'im also tered. Shrei kosher beimur and imlan emurim b'olam mizbeach also lo yered. Not that it's kosher that way, not that it's the proper way, but you take them down. In other words, we're learning out. This is like learning out C from B. C from B. Why do you say that if the dam stayed overnight and then you put the carbon or any part of it on the mizbeach, you leave it up there? Because the same thing was by Murim. By Murim we saw that. Okay, why is that by Murim? Murim also supposed to be on the same day, the same night, not the next day. So lon by Murim kosher. Why? Shori lon the basar. Oh, because by basar we find that sometimes overnight it's okay. Where is that? By a shlomim. A shlomim is eaten for 2 days and a night. It doesn't become nosar the next morning. If you offer the carbon on Monday, you could still eat it on Tuesday. So there it's mamish kosher. So why do we say lon murim is kosher? Even kosher, not kosher, but it's if you put the carbon on the mizbeach, you leave it up there because you find by basar that you could do things that over the next day. That's mamish kosher. So here's your A and B and C. What's that? The A is lon bebasar. Lon bebasar is sometimes okay by shlamim. So therefore, if the murim is left over overnight, even though it's by a carbon, you're not allowed to leave it overnight. But since you find by the basar, lon bebasar by shlamim is kosher, mamish kosher. Same thing by lon beimurim. We leave that up there also. What about dam? Dam is learned out from emurim. So here you have your A, B, and C. That the basar is A. You learn out the emurim B from A with a comparison, and you learn out dam from the emurim by a comparison. And then he goes on. This is all from the Gemara in Daf Dalet. Yotze, if it left the Beis Hamikdash, right? If it left the Beis Hamikdash, why is it kosher? Hol v'yotze kosher babama. Oh, listen to this. If the carbon left the, let's say the meat left the Beis Hamikdash, and then it came back in, and you put it on the mizbeach, you leave it up there. Why? Because by a bama, it's kosher. Why is it kosher by a bama? What's a bama? When the time when they didn't have the Beis Hamikdash, and people were allowed to bring karbanos on their own backyard altars, they're allowed to. Well, that's automatically yotze. There is no yotze. It's all outside. There's no perimeter of the Azara or the Harabayas or the Heichal or anything. It's all outside. So you say, since you find that yotze is okay by a bama where it's mamish mutter, so yotze here also, if you leave it, even though it's puzzle over here by a carbon, but if you put it on this bech, it's okay. Tame, why is it tame okay? It did it. By varasibur, if it became tame, it's mutter. So therefore, if a carbon became tame, even though it's finished, it's no good. You shouldn't put it on his bech, but if you put it on his bech, you leave it up there. Chutz l'zmano, if it's a chutz l'zmano, also you leave it up there. That's machshava pigul. Hol maras lepigugo. Since even though it's pigul, you're supposed to continue all the processes. In fact, if you don't, it's not really pigul. If you had a machshava pigul by shchita or by kabbalah or by halacha, you still have to be zorek the dam. Chutz l'mkomo hol hukish to chutz l'zmano. Chutz l'makom is hukish is compared to chutz l'zman. Juxtaposed there to teach me the same. Shekiblu psulin, if a puzzle was makabel the dam, also that ruins the carbon. unless there was more dam there. Ruins the carbon. V'zarko any v'zarikid. Why is that okay if you leave the carbon up on the mizbeach, right? We're talking about people who are puzzle to do avodas sibur, like a person who's tamei. So that's the puzzle that we're speaking about. In other words, you're learning out one from the other. How can you learn out a murim from basar? A murim is not kosher to leave it overnight, but by a shlamim to leave it over the second night is kosher. Same thing. How can you learn out yotzei is okay even though if the carbon left the perimeter of the base of Mikdash, it's puzzle. But if you brought it back in, you put it on the you leave it up there. Why? Because by bama yotzei is mutter. But that's mutter. Can you learn something which is not kosher from something which is kosher? In other words, what's kosher? Let's say to bring a carbon on the bama, where you're allowed to leave it outside because there is no inside and outside by a bama. It's all outside. So everything is outside there. Or can you learn out from shlamim by basar of shlamim, which is normal to leave it? You can eat it the next day. The answer is Tana mizos Torah sa'ola riba. He includes all these things from the word Torah riba, like Rav Shimon does over there, samachle. In other words, like Rashi explains that the pasuk is the ikar. The reason he knows these things are mutter is not simply because it's A and B and C, but rather he bases it on the pasuk that these things are based on the pasuk. These things are mutter. And the svara, Rashi says on the side, the kra ikar v'tami asmachta. He gave these svaras for it, A to B and B to C, but the real thing he's basing on is the pasuk. But anyway, you do see here that A to B and B to C works by binyan av when it's a simple comparison, but no more. That completes the chart. If that was confusing, we're done now with the chart. And like the last box in the chart in the lower left-hand column and lower left-hand part of the chart says that Davalam binyanav could learn out from another binyanav. In other words, you can learn out C from B, even though you learn by a comparison. If you learn out B from A by the comparison, why? Well, we see by Lina Badam that the dam stayed overnight, and that would ruin it. That's puzzle that Adam still the carbon. If you put it on the mizbeach, is you leave it up there. Why? Because you find it by a murin. That's the dam is the C, a murin is the B, and basar of shlamim is the A, which is kosher to leave overnight because the shlamim is okay for 2 days and a night. Now, what did the Mishnah say? If you look back on Mem Zayin and Days, our Mishnah and the Mishnah we quote every day in the Gemara in davening in Karbanos, where we say Shiuri Hadam, the leftover dam, right? Shiuri Dam. Now, what did we talk? We talked about the kachim, fine, but we talked specifically about Parvasar Shliam and Kippurim, that you have to shech in the north and the Kibbutz Dam is the north and Dam and Tana Zoy Ben bottom. Remember, we said that there are, let's say, at least 43 different zrikos that you do. Remember, 16 in the Kodesh Kodashim on Ben bottom, and 16 towards the Parochas in there. That's 32. And the Mizbeach Hazav has another four, and then another 7 towards the Mizbeach Hazav. So you have a total of 43, and you have to do every one. Matan Mechmekav. If you didn't do all 43, the carbon is no good. Now he says what? That the leftover down, whatever's left over in the mizrak, in the bowl, you have to pour that on the outer mizbeach. In other words, until now we're talking about all the 43 zrikas inside the heichal, whether it's inside the Kodesh Kodashim, inside the heichal towards the paroches, or on the mizbeach hazav, which is mizbeach pnimi. The leftover dam that you pour outside. Where outside? On the here's the outer mizbeach. This is mizbeach ha'ola. It's called mizbeach ha'ola or mizbeach hanachoshes. In the times of Moshe, it was made out of nachoshes. It was portable. Afterwards, it's called mizbeach hadamah. This is the a bird's eye view of the mizbeach. Now, where do you pour it? Right here at the yesod. There's the yesod's got 2 holes there. One is, so to speak, on the south, and one's on the west. And why is that? Because why do we do it on that side? As we'll see now, why is it on the west? Because when you come out of the heichal, when he comes out, he's inside the heichal now, right? The Kohen has sprinkled the dam in the Kodesh Kodashim and in the heichal and on the inner mizbeach. Now he comes outside. The first point that he's going to come to on the west is the is the west side. He's going to come to the west side of the Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, Shiur Dam Shavach. Again, the Mishnah said, Shiur Shavach El Yesod Mizbeach, Shiur Dam Shofech Al Yesod Ma'aravi, on the western foundation of the Mizbeach Achitzon. Again, Mizbeach, this is the Mizbeach Achitzon, also called Mizbeach Hanachoshes, or Mizbeach Ha'olah, right? It's called that. And why on the western side? My time, Amakra, El Yisod Mizbeach Ha'olah, Asher Pesach Olam Moed, Hahu Depagav Reisha, which is at the door of the Olam Moed. When he comes out of the Olam Moed, that means he comes out of the Heichal. That's the Olam Moed. The first plane he's going to come is on the west. Why? Because the Olam Moed is to the east of that. The Heichal is to the east of the Mizbeach. If you look at the I don't bring the big chart with me, but here's the Heichal, and when he comes out, he's coming out on the west side of the Mizbeach. Right? This is east. It says this is Marov. Oh, it's west. That's west. I'm not sure if he's got this thing correct. Let's see, north. Yeah, that's east. Yeah, that's east. So when he comes out on the western side of the Mizbeach. Okay, so my time, Omakra, El Yisod Mizbeach Ha'olah, Asher Pesach Olam Moed, right? Because he's coming out from the west, and then there's a west and east. This is the west side of the Heicha, of the Mizbeach. He's coming out on the western side. That's the south, north, and when he's coming out of the Heichal, like, you know, when you go to the Kotel today, they tell you that if you go in those tunnels, there's a place which is mamish opposite the Kodesh Kodashim. Okay, that would be here. This is the west side, and here is the Heichal, and the Kodesh Kodashim is on the closest part. It's on the west side. The east is towards Harazesim. That's where the Ezra Nashim was, etc. That's towards that side. So when he comes out of the Heichal, he comes to the west side of the Mizbeach. So again, says the Gemara halfway down on the page on Nun Aleph, my time El Yisod Mizbeach Ha'olah Asher Pesach Olam Moed, Hahu Depagav Reisha. When he comes out of the Heichal, the first side that he's going to come to is the west side of the Mizbeach, and that's where he's going to pour the dam. That's the Shirayim. Now, this is after he did all the regular zrikot, sprinklings. The rest is poured onto the Mizbeach. Now the Gemara is going to, now we're going to see a brisa. Tan Rabbanan. El Yisod Mizbeach Ha'olah. There are 5 times when it talks about pouring the Shirayim on the Yisod, on the foundation of the outer Mizbeach. As we'll see, the inner Mizbeach had no Yisod. It was just like a cube. It was just a cube. It didn't have a Yisod. What do we mean by the Yisod? We mean this. Let's see. Here. This is the Yisod. You only see very little of it on this side. It's on the west side, and it doesn't. This diagram doesn't have it. There's a little Yisod, which is an amma high, vertical high, and an amma wide, and together that forms the Mizbeach. That's the foundation of the Mizbeach. That's the outer part, and that's an amma. The whole Mizbeach is 10 ammas high. One amma, the first amma on the outer perimeter is 1 amma high and 1 amma wide from the rest of the structure of the Mizbeach. Okay, now, it says it 5 times, El Yisod Mizbeach Ha'olah. Basically, it sometimes it says Mizbeach, but it says 3 times it says Mizbeach Ha'olah. Why? 2 times it says it by Par Kohen Mashiach and by Par Helam Davar. Okay, then it says it by the Sawyer of the Nasi. Now, the Par Mashiach and Par Kohen Davar, those are brought inside the Heichal, as we've learned. So, Mel, you come outside with the dam and you pour it on the first place that you're going to come to, which is the west side of the Mizbeach. But by the other ones that it says we're talking about karbonos that are brought on the outside. With third time it says it is the Sar of the Nasi. Why does it have to say all these times? El Yisod Mizbeach Ha'olah and Yisod Mizbeach Ha'olah, El Yisod HaMizbeach. Why does it repeat it? And the last 2 times, it says it by regular karbanos, like the carbon of the chatas. Chatas could be a kizbah or a seira. So it says once by a kizbah and once by a seira. Rashi brings down all this, right? The one is by the last 2 are sarnasi v'shel kivsas yachid, the siras yachid by kivsas asira. So it says it 5 times. Why does it say it 5 times? So the Gemara is going to go into that right now. So Taraban El Yisod Mizbach Ola. What does the first one tell me? Below Yisod Mizbech Apnimi. In other words, the first time we're talking about Bar Kohen Mashiach, where the dam is brought on the inside. So you might think that the shirayim was left over is also on the inside. No, you bring that outside to the outer mizbeach. Below Yisod Mizbach Apnimi. The first one's on Mizbach Ola. That's where the Ola is brought. The Ola is brought on the outer mizbeach. And so you bring it to the outer mizbeach and not the inner mizbeach. Even though you sprinkled stuff on the inner mizbeach, but the pouring of the remaining blood, that goes in the outer mizbeach. Okay, that's the first one. Then it says it again by Par Helam Davar. El Yisod Mizbach Ola. What does it teach me that again for? You already know that the shiraim goes on the outer one. It says Ein Lo Yisod L'Pnimi Atzmo, to tell me that the inner one has no Yisod. The extra pasuk of here telling me El Yisod Mizbach Ola is to teach me that only the Mizbach Ola, only the outer Mizbeach has a Yisod. The inner one doesn't have one. El Yisod Mizbach Ola. What is the third time necessary for? The third time I said is by Sawyer, by the Sawyer of a Nasi, and there the whole carbon is outside. Why would you think you bring this remainder, the shirayim? Why would you bring it? Where else would you bring it except for the outside? 10 Yisod the Mizbach Shalola. To teach me that the Mizbach Ola has Yisod. What does that mean? That all karbanos that are brought, that's to tell me that it's a general rule, that all karbanos are brought. Oh, you bring a shlamim, you bring an Ola, you bring a chatos, you bring an osham, a toda, whatever the carbon is, the shiraim always goes on the Mizbeach Ola. That's the idea. 10 Yisod the Mizbach Shal Ola. Says Rashi, if you look down in the wide lines in Rashi, about 10, 12 lines from the bottom of the page. To tell me, El Yisod Mizbach Ola, it's right about 10 lines from the bottom of the page. Rashi says, El Yisod Mizbach Ola, 10 Yisod Mizbach Shalola, 10 Torah Shvichas Shirayim, Yisod Lehilchas Mizbech Shalola. Make this a general rule that Shvichas of all Shirayim go on the Yisod from Mizbeach of Ola. She had Mizbeach tone Ba'ola. Ubechol dam manitnal. If any dam that goes on the outer Mizbeach, Shvichas dam mal Yisod im nisher b'kli klum. Shezorit men shteis rikos l'shtei kronos. When in most karbonos, as we'll see, most karbonos you do 2 zrika shein arba. You do it on 2 opposite corners. That would be the southwest corner and the northeast corner. Why? As we mentioned, the southeast corner, as you see on this diagram, has no Yisod. The Yisod went on the west side and on the north side and partially on the east side. But the southeast corner didn't have any Yisod. The Yisod didn't go all the way around. So therefore, when you had to do Shtaim Shein Arba, when you had to do 2 Zrikas, which is really 4, because you did it on 2 corners, 2 opposite corners, diagonally opposite from one another. If you did it on the 2 corners, it went on all 4 sides, because each corner has 2 sides to it. So you did it on the southwest corner and northeast corner. However, when you did it, what do you do with the leftover dam? All those karbanos, the leftover dam also has to go on the Yisod, right? Umishum says Rashi, Kshizorik Mena Shtei Zrika Shtei Kronos Yishbechenel Yisod. The Shiraim goes on Yisod. Umishum the Ola Lo Ksiv Shvicha Shiraim. By Ola itself, it doesn't say Shvicha Shiraim. Itzrich Melech Mehacha. So you learn out from the Sawyer Nasi when it says there also El Yisod Mizbach Ola to tell me that all karbanos, the shiraim have to go on the Yisod. Then the Gemara says, "Oh, Eino," back in the Gemara, about 10 lines on from the bottom of the page in the Gemara, 10 lines up from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. "Oh, Eino Ella Mizbeach Shalola Yehei Yisod." Maybe he's simply telling me that the Mizbeach of the Ola, when you bring a carbon Ola, "Oh, Eino Ba," says Rashi. Now I'm reading Rashi 8 lines from the bottom of the page, or 8 lines. Maybe it's not teaching anything about shiraim at all. Tell me that maybe simply telling you that when you sprinkle the dam by an olet shtaim shein arba, it's not like chatos where you go on all 4 corners, but you do 2 zrikos below the chut hasikra on the bottom half of the mizbeach. You do 2, which is 4. Where do you do the 2 for? Do them where I just mentioned before. You do them where there's a Yisod, on the southwest corner and the northeast corner. Maybe that's what the pasuk's teaching me. Oh, Eno, again, in the Gemara, right, says, to exclude the southeast corner, like we're going to see later on. So in the Gemara, reading in the Gemara, 10 lines from the bottom page, oh, Eno, Elam is Shalola, Yehei Yisod, there should be Yisod there. In other words, when you do the sprinkling, not the Shirayim, but the regular sprinkling has to be on the two opposite corners. So Rabbi Shmuel says, no. Kal v'chomer, I don't need that. I don't need I don't need a pasuk to teach me that. Kal v'chomer, mashirayim shein mechaper, madashirayim, which is not mechaper, doesn't atone, because as we said, the Mishnah itself says you pour the remaining blood on the yesod, but if you didn't do it, it's not ma'akiv, right? If you didn't do it, what does the Mishnah say? Again, you can read it from your siddur or read it in the Gemara. Okay, there's a mandomer who holds that it is ma'akiv, but the Mishnah said if you didn't do it, it's not ma'akiv. So Rabbi Shmuel says, let's kavachom mashrayim she'ein mechaprin. Tun yisod needs the yisod. Tchilas ola, the beginning of the ola, meaning when you do the regular sprinkling, shemachaperes, that's mechaper. Okay, an ola is really mechaper only on an assay. So usually an ola is thought of as a doron, as a gift to God, but it's also mechaper to some degree, or it's ma'akiv punishment at least. And adin she'tu'unas, certainly should need yisod. So therefore, I don't need a pasuk to teach me that the regular zrikas need the yisod. If Shirayim needs the yisod, certainly the zrikas themselves need yisod. That's what Rabbi Shmuel says. Rabbi Kiva adds on a little bit more. We'll see the difference between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel later on. Rabbi Kiva, Mashram shein mecham be'ein bo and lechapara. Manach Shirayim, which is not mechaper, and it doesn't come to be mechaper. Says he's adding on a little bit more. We'll see what how his differences. Rabbi Shmuel also said, "Mam Shram shein mechaper need yisod." The chilas ola certainly needs mechaper need yisod. Rabbi Kiva says, "Mashram shein mechaper be'ein bo lechapara." Tunin yisod chilas ola shemechaperes su bo lechaper. It's mechaper and it comes to mechaper. Ein adin shetan yisod need yisod. So therefore, we don't need a pasuk to tell me that the original zrikas have to be where there's a yisod. Im keimatam el yisod mizbach ola. What is that teaching me? 10 yisod le'mizbach shalola. In other words, not build them. It doesn't mean build a foundation there. It means make the rule of yisod for all karbanos brought not only on the inner ones like where it says befeiros, but on the outer ones too. So any carbon, whether it's a toda, whether it's a shlamim, whether it's a ola, whether it's a chatas, whether it's an osham, whatever it is, you have to always put the remainder of the blood on the yisod. Those are the first three. Amar Mar. So now, before we get to the last ones, before we even get to explain why do we need the last ones, because the last ones it doesn't say. By the last ones it just says El Yisod Mizbeach. It doesn't go Mizbach Ola. Okay. Omer Mar El Yisod Mizbeach V'lo Yisod Mizbeach Apnimi. The first one. What was the first drasha? It says it says by Parko Mashiach. It says the Shirayim. What do you do? Veskol Adam Yishpoch El Yisod Mizbach Ola. What does that teach me? We said, all right, El Yisod Mizbach Ola V'lo Yisod Mizbeach. Don't put on the Yisod Mizbeach Pnimi. What do you mean? How do you know it's coming to exclude Mizbeach Pnimi? You need it just to tell me the basic idea that you have to put the dam over there. Says Rashi 4 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Maybe simply telling you, listen, if I did all the zrikas, the 43 zrikas are inside the heichal, right? So what do you do with the leftover dam? Put it there too. Says no, got to put it on the outer one. How do you know that it's coming to exclude that there is no inner one? That you don't put not that you don't put it that we only know from the second pasuk. We know that there is no inner one. But how do you know that you're not supposed to do it on the inner one? How do you know you're supposed to do it on the outer one? That's what I need the pasuk for. You might think you can put it on the inner one. Kamash one, you put it on the outer one. So someone's basically says, but not the inner one. Who says not the inner one? Maybe it means even the outer one. Maybe it means you can put it on the outer one. If you want, you can put it on the inner one too. Says Rashi again, 4 lines from that page. You can put it on the inner one too if you want. Where do you get a meat? Where do you have an exclusion here? But Maisa, we learned there is no yisod on the inner one. That's from the extra pasuk. But from the first pasuk, when the first pasuk it says you take the dam of the inner karbanos and you sprinkle it, the remainder you put on the outer one. So he says the outer one and not the inner one. How do you know it's not the inner one? It maybe just means even the outer one. He says, no, that I know. Legufe, I know that it's got to be in the outer one because it says Asher Pesach Ol Moed. It tells you it's got to be the outer one. Why? Because it says it's only at the door of the Ol Moed. The door of the Ol Moed is where the outer one is. So I know it has to be on the outer one. What's the idea of Mizbach Ola? To teach me Mizbech Ola below Mizbech Pnimi. Tell me not, Rafka, right? Said, so I know the Gufei Miasher Pesach Ol Moed. Says Rashi, Dainu Chitzon. By Moshe Lechtev El Yisod Mizbech Asher Pesach Ol Moed. Could have just said El Yisod Mizbech Asher Pesach Ol Moed. Mizbach Ola Lami. Why did it say Mizbach Ola? Tell me Mizbach Ola and not the inner one. Okay, right? Me'ol Moed Nafka, right? And so I already know that. So therefore, what do I Mizbach Ola teach me? Not the inner one. Then the second one we said is to teach me that there is no inner one. On the inner Mizbech, the inner Mizbech has no Yisod at all. The inner Mizbech, which is a small Mizbech, right? It's the Mizbech Aktoris, Mizbech Hazov, has no Yisod there at all. That's learned out from the second pasuk. What about the third pasuk? The third pasuk we said teaches me, right? El Yisod Mizbach Ha'ola teaches me 10 Yisod Mizbech Shalola. Turn the page now to Nun Alpha and Beis. 10 Yisod Mizbech Shalola. Make the rule that all karbonos brought on the Mizbech Ola, you have to bring the dam on the shiraim there. If it's going to tell me the basic pshat, right? Well, the basic pshat that what? That you put the dam there, right? Hani lamali crow. Lamali takes out kroll the shiraim. Lamali shiraim. What does it teach me? What does it have to teach me that the shiraim goes on the outer one? Habroy of it. The whole carpet is brought outside. The third pasuk is speaking about the Sarnasi, where the whole avod is on the outer one. So what do you think? It's just teaching me El Yisod Mizbach Ola? We're already on the Mizbach Ola. What would you think? Where else would you put it? He says 10 Yisod Mizbach Ola. The drush is all karbonos brought on the outer Mizbeach need shirayim on the Yisod of the outer Mizbeach. Isakach Chesiv Hani Lamali shirayim. What are we to teach me about the shirayim? Habaroy of it. The whole avod there was done outside. Tell me, this is the drasha. The broy legvoy, we're already on Nun Beis Amud Aleph, right? Maybe it's telling me, you know what? Maybe this. What do we see from the first two ones? From the Parko Mashiach and the Param Dabar, the avod is on inside the Echel, and the Shrine is outside. Okay. Now the third one is a carbon that's on the outside, the Sar of the Nasi. So maybe we reverse it. Just like the inner ones, you bring the shrine on the outside. Maybe the outer ones, you bring the shrine on the inside. Maybe that would be the case. But the inner one doesn't have a yisod at all, so it can't be that at all. So therefore, what's the third one teaching me? That you have to make the rule of tein yisod, tein yisod l'mizbeach shelo, make the rule of yisod, meaning that all karbanos, the shirayim have to be on the yisod of the outer mizbeach. That's the rule. O eino ella mizbach shalola yeh yisod. Then the Gemara went on. The Brisa said, "Oh, Eina." Remember, we said 10 lines from the bottom page on Nun Aleph. Now we're trying to understand that, or maybe it simply means to tell me that what? That the regular carbon ola, the sprinklings that you do, the shtayim shein arba, are on the opposite corners of the mizbeach, which means they'd have to be in the southwest and the northeast, because that's the only place where you have yisod. You also have yisod on the northwest, but if it would be opposite corners, northwest goes opposite with the southeast. You won't have yisod. There's no yisod on the southeast. So it can't be in the northwest where there is indeed a yisod. The only way to do shtayim shein arba, the only way to do two zrikas, which comes out on all four walls, is the southwest and the northeast, right? So maybe that's what it's come to teach me, right? Ella oein olam mizbach shalola yeh yisod, meaning you should on the regular sprinklings of the ola, you should do it southwest and northeast. It says miksiv el yisod ha'ola. If you'd only be touching me about ola itself, which has to be in the southwest and northeast, so it should just say yisod ha'ola. El yisod mizbach ha'ola ksiv. Doesn't say yisod ha'ola teaching me the regular rules of how do you bring an ola. It says yisod mizbach ha'ola. What is it teaching me that? So it's teaching me that to teach me that all karbanos have to be done that way. That the shrayim, we're speaking about the shrayim, has to go on the southwest corner of the yisod, or the west side of the mizbeach on the yisod, and they're not speaking simply about how you do the regular zrikas of an ola. So the Gemara says no. If it would say ola v'yamina b'zekifa, I might think if it would only say yisod ha'ola and it wouldn't say mizbach ola, I would think that the sprinklings can be on the vertical side of the. I would think yisod ha'ola. In other words, if it would say that, how could you say that it means then I would think you could do it on the vertical side of the yesod. Remember, the yesod I said is an amma wide and an amma high from the ground, right? So maybe I would think that you do it on the vertical side, right? Beskifa el yesod hashdechsiv el yesod mizbacha ola. Once you say mizbacha ola, agago yesod. It's on the roof, meaning on the horizontal side of the base. The base starts off from the ground vertically, and then it's got a top, right? That's the horizontal part. So it says El Yisod Mizbach Ola is on the gag of the Yisod. That's why it says, in other words, maybe indeed we're talking about the Zrikas, not the Shirayim, right? Because he said if it would be, first you want to say what? If we're speaking about the Zrikas itself, it should say El Yisod Ola. No, but if we say El Yisod Ola, I might think that you do the Zrikas on the vertical side of the Yisod, not on the horizontal side. So it says Mizbach Ola to tell me you do it on the horizontal side, which is like a Mizbeach, just like the Mizbeach has a vertical and a top, a flat part on top, a horizontal part. So the same way, you have to put the Zrikas Nam on the horizontal part. Rabbi Shmuel, pardon?
Don't you have the Karnot there at the top?
That's at the top. We're talking about the Mizbeach. We're talking here at the lower part, because the sprinklings of the Ola go on the lower part of the Mizbeach, below the Chut HaSikra, correct.
So where
the horizontal we're talking about of the base of the base of the Yesod, right? Similar to the Mizbeach, which has a horizontal part. So maybe that's what it's come to teach. Rabbi Shmuel, no, Gag Yesod Lam Likra. I don't need to tell me that it's got to be on that Gag Yesod is a person. Again, Rabbi Shmuel said, Umashi Arichatas. Marach, the leftover part of the chatas, remaining blood of chatas, she'ein mechaper, tuna gag yisod. That has to be poured on the top. Tchilas ola shemechaperes and adin shetar gag yisod. It's a kal v'chomer. If the shiurim, when you pour the remaining, goes on the holes which are on the horizontal part of the yisod. So obviously, if you're talking about the original zrikas of the ola, certainly they would need the gag of the yisod. If the Shirayim needs that, which is not mechaper, certainly that. And again, Rabbi Kiva's rush is umashi arichatash ein mechaper bein born mechaper. This is like a repeat of what we saw Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva on an alpha manal, but now he's explaining it more. Rabbi Kiva mashi arichatash ein mechaper bein born mechaper to negag yisod chilas ola shemechaper bar lechaper and a din yisod, so that we know anyway. In other words, we know that it must be the gag of the yisod. So it can't be teaching me that it says mizbeach, that is mizbach ola to teach me gaga yisod. Elamai imkei matam alomer el yisod mizbach ola 10 yisod mizbach ola. They make a general rule that all karbanos brought on the outer mizbeach also must need the shirayim. My binayu. Okay, so therefore that's the drasha. That's the third drasha. My binayu. What's the difference between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel? Rabbi Shmuel said, Kal v'chomer marach. Remember, Rabbi Shmuel and Amar Aleph, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva were talking about Kal v'chomer shirayim in general, that are machaper need yisod, so tchila soshem chaperes and din shen yisod. Now he says, ma shirayim even of achatas, ma shirayim of achatas, which that's what we're talking about. That's the first psukim. We're all the first three psukim. We're only, in fact, all the psukim we're talking about achatas of one sort or another. First one was the par Mashiach. Second was par the third one was the Sor of the Nasi, that's a chatas, and then we talked about the regular Kizba Seira, the last two of regular chatas. So he says, Marach chatas, which the Shirayim of the chatas is not machaper, and what needs the Gag of the Yisod, certainly the Tchilas Ola needs the Gag of the Yisod. In other words, we know in general, we're saying is that the pasuk can't be teaching me that the regular sprinklings of the Ola, the Shtaim Shein Arba, must be where there is a yesod. That can't be, because that would be obvious. If the Shirayim needs the yesod, certainly the original Zrikas must need the yesod. Here you want to say, maybe it's coming to teach me that it needs the gag of the yesod. That's also a kal v'chomer. Elamai imkei matam alomers el yesod mizbach ola te yesod mizbach ola. Magna, what's between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel? Amar Bara Barava Shirayim ma'akveni kibinayu. Right? Is Shirayim even ma'akiv? In other words, is it ma'akiv? Is it indispensable? Marsav ma'akvi, marsav lo ma'akvi. Rashi says over here, Rashi says, Rabbi Shmuel savar kapara hu de lo mechaper, aval ikuv mekabe. Rabbi Shmuel says, listen, it's not mechaber. Rabbi Shmuel simply said what? That marach, the shiraim of the chatas, is not mechaper, and what? And needs the yisod, and needs the gag of the yisod. Chila solish and mechaperes certainly needs the yisod. That's what Rabbi Shmuel said. Rabbi Kiva said even more. He said it's not mechaper and born lechaper. Rabbi Kiva So Rabbi Shmuel holds it's not mechaper, but it's ma'akiv, not like we saw in the Mishnah, that it's ma'akiv, it's indispensable. You don't need it for kapara, but you need it for, it's ma'akiv. If you didn't do it, you didn't fulfill the carbon properly, you got to bring it again. Rabbi Kiva, the most of the ein born lechaper, Rabbi Kiva says, ein born lechaper, ashminan, dein matan domim, shel matana, shel, these matanos, it's not matanos, shem matan domim, shel shirayim, it must be, shel azos, Rashi, the gear says shel hazos. Yeah, shel hazos toli bahen. That's what he shows. Hazos toli bahen, meaning the hazos that you did, these rikas that you did, whether it's in the inner carbon or the outer carbon, all those rikas you did on the mizbeach, they're not dependent on that. The lo ma'akvi shirayim lazos. They're not ma'akvi, meaning if you didn't do the shirayim, it's not ma'akvi. You still get a full kapara. So that's the machlokes. Mar savar ma'akvi. Rabbi Shmuel says that the shirayim is ma'akiv, even though it's not bar lechaper, and Rabbi Kiva holds no, it's not machaper, and it's also not ma'akiv, and it's also not ma'akiv. It's not indispensable. Rav Papa gives a different drasha. Rav Papa says the kuliyama shirayim ein ma'akvin. We'll see this. We'll get into this tomorrow. We'll continue the Gemara from here from Rav Papa Omar. He holds that they all hold that what shiraim is not ma'akiv. The machlokes is by mitzvah of the chatas of. By chatas of, what do you do with the chatas of after you do malika and sever the head or partially sever the head, at least cut the simanim? You sprinkle the dam, and then you have to squeeze out the dam on the mizbeach, and that's what the machlokes is between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, a different aspect of it. We'll pick up from here tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. Have a good day. Kol tuv. On that part of it has to go all the way from he's standing on the northwest corner all the way to the Makom HaDeshen, which is one of the most difficult things we've ever had. You remember it from last time, because it's like throwing a wiffle ball. If you're throwing a hard ball, you can throw it far, but a wiffle ball, which is very light, very hard to throw it, right? A great distance.